Presenting Executive Officer.
Yes, good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. Nancy S. Feldman for the Executive Officer.
Thank you. Those who will be testifying in this matter, please rise to be sworn in. Raise your right hand. Do you promise to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God? Thank you. Mr. Parker, you care to make an opening statement?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and hearing board members. As I mentioned, my name is Jeff Parker. I'm here with my colleague Allison Cleaver on this request to extend, based on consent, to extend the abatement order between Exide Technologies and the Air Quality Management District. We intend to present one witness today, Mr. Nicholas Sarias, who took the oath. I know that the three members of the panel have a long history in this abatement proceeding, but for the benefit of the two new members and reminder for the three members who have been involved, the Exide facility in Vernon is a former lead battery recycling facility. It is no longer conducting recycling activities and is in the process right now of regulatory closure of the facility. So that regulatory closure involves the DTSC issuing a closure plan, after which the Air Quality Management District will review and approve what's known as a compliance plan for closure, as well as a modification of the facility's Title V permit. The reason that Exide requests the extension of this abatement order is so that the provisions of the order, which include a third-party monitor for activities that possibly will generate dust, will be on site and observing those activities so that they can go on during the time period prior to the AQMD's approval of the compliance plan for closure and modification of the permit, so that essentially there's not a lost time gap between when the DTSC approves the closure plan and the district approves the two documents it has to do. The activities that are anticipated during that time period are both the RCRA facility investigation work that's ordered by the DTSC, as well as maintenance, compliance, and other work during that period. The current abatement order has been in place for over 2 years. It has what's known as a dust mitigation plan that was initially prepared to cover anticipated major work that was outlined in the plan, but subsequently, based on the parties' agreement, it was modified so that what are known sort of as mini mitigation plans or incremental plans for specific activities, planned activities, would be prepared and submitted to the district, and then either modified or approved based on the district's review. And then a third-party independent monitor, Tetra Tech, which is funded by Exide but hired by the district, observes any such activities and ensures that there's compliance with the mitigation plans, and they also prepare a weekly report to the district. In that time period, as I mentioned, there have been over 130 of these incremental plans that have been prepared, and there have been no emission violations. Pursuant to the abatement order, Exide also files, at this point, a quarterly report with the hearing board just indicating what activities have taken place in a general manner and noting whether Tetra Tech has identified any problems. And fortunately, to this point, there have not been. The reason we're here today is because the current abatement order expires December 15th, and Exide is not going to have its approvals from DTSC and the Air Quality District by that time, and both the district and Exide want to ensure coverage beyond that. As I mentioned, this is a stipulated agreement between Exide and the district. And granting the extension results in several positive benefits, including there is more oversight, which we know the community definitely likes. There's an independent third-party monitor that's on site to observe these activities. There is essentially an extra protection against exceedances by virtue of the monitoring plans and the oversight. It also will get an expedited start and therefore an expedited finish to the closure process, which everyone wants to get underway and get done as soon as possible. So we want this because it provides the benefits of the third-party monitor and these protections. It gets things going, and because of the processes that are in place, it also provides for transparency and accountability, which, as the hearing board is aware from the prior proceedings, there's a heightened public interest with respect to this facility, and want to make sure that those procedures we put in place will continue. The key provisions of the order are the same as in the prior order. There's notification to the district of upcoming work before it's undertaken, preparation of dust mitigation plans for construction or maintenance activities that are expected to generate dust. And there's this independent third-party monitor of the activities that are expected to generate dust, followed by the reports. As I mentioned, the current order expires December 15th. The DTSC has indicated that it expects to approve the closure plan tomorrow, which is, we're happy to get that under our belt and working towards it, towards closure. The district has indicated that it needs to review and approve the compliance plan and modification of the permit, which we expect that process may take 6 to 8 months because it involves, obviously, review by the technical staff, plus EPA review, an EPA review period and a public comment period. During this time, we would like to begin the preparatory work under the mitigation plan and third-party oversight because it benefits all the stakeholders, and frankly, starting sooner means finishing sooner. The clerk has a copy of this, which is a timeline. If we could mark that as the next exhibit for the board. And if I could ask the clerk what exhibit number that is. Eight? A? Okay. Okay, so Exhibit A, which has been provided to the board and to the district's council, is a simplified timeline that just goes through the timing of the prior abatement orders to illustrate what's been going on during this time period, and also to note for the board's benefit when the compliance plan was delivered to the district, which is November 30th of 2015, and the status of the DTSC closure plan and the current expiration date of the abatement order, which I think illustrates why we need this and the time period during which we request this, which would be an outside date of September 29th, 2017. And after the district's opening, our witness will go through the factual basis and be able to answer any questions the board may have. Thank you.
Okay, before we hear from the district on its opening, if there's anyone in the audience who may wish to testify in this matter, I would ask that you please fill out a yellow request to speak card. They're on the shelf just by the door at the back of the room. Ms. Feldman?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, I would like to note, and I hope the board notes, that this petition was filed by the respondent. It's really quite extraordinary, I think, for the respondent to come in and affirmatively request the hearing board to extend an order for abatement. And I think it goes to show how cooperatively we've been working with Exide on this whole project to date. When the board first issued the order for abatement, and it became apparent over the course of at least a year or a year and a half that ultimately Exide would close this facility, we knew that the closure process would be a protracted one and would take a significant period of time, and in fact that is being brought to bear here. Let me just put the DTSC closure plan in context for you as it relates to what the AQMD is doing. DTSC has been reviewing Exide's closure plan for quite a long time and has assured us that approval of the plan is imminent, and this was after several delays. The AQMD cannot approve the AQMD closure plan until after DTSC does its comprehensive review and approves theirs. DTSC has primary jurisdiction over the closure of the facility. The AQMD is playing a supporting role in this, and accordingly, we did not want to approve a plan that was not entirely consistent with whatever DTSC ultimately approved. And so although Exide filed its closure plan with the AQMD about a year ago, a little more, we have not been holding back approval for any deficiencies in the plan or because we're just not getting around to it. It was simply a matter of coordinating with the agency that has primary jurisdiction over closure of the facility. In terms of today's hearing, there are two factors that are driving the district's commitment to the extension of the current order. And Mr. Parker did a good job on hitting both of them, but I'm going to reiterate just so that we drive the points home. First is the importance that we have continued implementation of the dust mitigation plan. Right now, as of this minute today, we don't have any sort of approved closure plan that would incorporate all the requirements that are in the dust mitigation plan contained in the current order for abatement. We've had great success in working with Exide on implementing the measures contained in that plan and modifying them as needed whenever unanticipated activities may occur on the site. There has been minimal to no activity at Exide for a very long period of time now. But as Mr. Parker indicated, as pre-closure activities are anticipated and ultimately undertaken, it becomes imperative that Exide remain subject to the dust mitigation plan contained in the order for abatement until we have final approval of a closure plan. Further, we want the continued presence of the third-party monitor, which also will become increasingly important as pre-closure activities are undertaken. These might generate fugitive dust, and that could become more of an issue as we proceed. You might think, well, if DTSC is approving the closure plan tomorrow, what's the deal? The plan does not get implemented immediately. Further, we have some outstanding activities to undertake here at the district, not the least of which is approval of the closure plan pursuant to our own district rule, and the renewal of the Title V permit. This all takes time. It's set forth in Exhibit A. This presents what is hopefully a worst-case scenario where the district will finally be able to take a step back from this facility, as indicated, continue to play a supporting role to DTSC and whatever other regulatory agencies might become involved in the closure of this site, but will no longer need an order for abatement.
Thank you. Mr. Parker, your first witness.
Thank you. Exide calls Nicholas Sarias. Mr. Sarias, if you could please state and spell your name for the record.
My name is Nicholas Sarias, Nicolas, last name Sarias, Serieyes.
What do you do for a living?
I am a Vice President of Environmental Health and Safety Compliance at Alta Environmental.
And what is Alta Environmental?
We are a technical, environmental, health and safety consulting firm, and we focus on water quality, air quality, building science, air, hazardous waste, hazardous materials.
What is your educational background?
I have 2 master's degrees, one in environmental engineering, one in civil engineering.
Do you hold any professional licenses in any state?
I do. I am a California licensed professional engineer, and I'm also certified by South Coast SCAQMD as a permitting professional.
Will you please tell the hearing board generally about your work experience in the environmental field?
I have over a decade of experience. My practice focuses on air quality and the management of hazardous waste and hazardous materials.
Are you familiar with Exide Technologies?
Yes, I am.
And what do you understand it to be?
So it is a, as you mentioned, a closed former battery recycling plant. And the company, as a company, also manufactures batteries.
And where is the Exide facility located?
It is at 2700 South Indiana Street in Vernon, California.
How did you become familiar with or involved with the Exide facility?
I first started to get involved in mid-2014 when Ed Mopas, who was the environmental manager back then, requested assistance.
And has your role changed since then?
Yes, quite significantly. Alta has taken over the day-to-day environmental management at the plant after this environmental manager resigned.
And are you the person from Alta who's primarily involved in or serves in that role?
Yes, I am.
So what are your duties as environmental manager at the facility?
My duties are to ensure environmental compliance, day-to-day environmental compliance, and more specifically for air quality, hazardous waste, hazardous materials, and stormwater as well.
How often is someone from Alta on site at the Exide facility?
We are on site Monday through Friday.
Is the facility currently recycling batteries?
No, it is not.
When did that cease?
That ceased in March 2014.
Are the recycling, the furnaces at the facility still operating?
No.
Will the facility resume battery recycling operations in the future?
No, the plant was permanently shut down.
Now, even though the plant is permanently shut down and is no longer operating the furnaces, are there other activities that are still ongoing?
Yes.
Can you please briefly describe for the board what those are?
Yes, there is wastewater treatment ongoing when it rains or when there is decontamination that has to happen. This water is captured and it has to be treated before it is released into the sanitary sewer. Then we also operate some bag houses for AQMD compliance, and we also have work that is ordered by DTSC, such as soil sampling, for example, and also some dust suppression activities required under the Rule 1420.1.
Now, you mentioned the dust suppression activities. Are you familiar with the mitigation, the document known as the mitigation plan for construction of risk reduction measures, RCRA, RFI sampling, and major maintenance activities?
Yes, I am.
If the board will, we've provided a copy of this. It was Exhibit 18, so it's already in the record in this abatement proceeding. We do not intend to go through it in detail, but it's provided for the board's reference in case there are any questions. If you can please take a look at Exhibit 18. Is that the dust mitigation plan?
Yes.
Can you generally describe what this plan is?
So the intent, the goal of the plan is to control any dust that would come from planned maintenance or construction activities.
Is there a procedure in place under the abatement order that Exide follows when it has planned construction or maintenance activities that it believes will potentially generate dust?
Yes, so we have bi-weekly meetings at the plant with the district. They are on Monday mornings and Thursday mornings at 7 a.m. So during these meetings, we discuss the planned activities for the week. When we believe as a group that some of these activities or that any activity has the potential to generate any dust, we will prepare a written work plan known as sub-mitigation plans, and we will submit this work plan to the district. The district will review the plan and approve it as is or with some amendments.
Hey, what is your role personally in that procedure?
I provide guidance on how to write the mitigation plans, and I review the mitigation plans.
And do you attend the meetings when you're there, when you're the representative there on Mondays or Thursdays?
Yes.
Now, what does the plan require the district to do when it gets the proposed mitigation plan?
So the district will review the plan and approve the plan as it is, or modify it, and so we will discuss any modification as a group.
If Exide believes that an activity will not generate dust, but the district, based on one of these Monday or Thursday meetings, disagrees, does it have the opportunity to require a one of these sub-mitigation plans?
Yes, absolutely, and that's the main purpose of those biweekly meetings, is to discuss any issues like that.
Since you've been involved at the facility, approximately how many of these sub-mitigation plans have been submitted to the district?
About 138.
How does the district verify that Exide is complying with the approved mitigation plans and sub-plans?
So the district has brought on Tetra Tech, an independent third-party oversight and monitoring group. Every time work is done under a mitigation plan, Tetra Tech is on site to monitor and document any deviation from the mitigation plan.
And does Tetra Tech prepare written reports to the district based on what it observes?
Yes, they do.
How often?
Weekly.
Since this mitigation plan and Tetra Tech's oversight has been in place, have there been any exceedances of the ambient lead standard?
No, none.
I'd like to move on to discuss the closure and pre-closure activities. So can you please briefly describe what closure of the facility means?
So closure of the facility means removing RCRA hazardous waste units from the site, and also removing any equipment or buildings that were associated with the battery recycling manufacturing process.
Is there a plan setting forth how the closure is supposed to take place?
Yes, and it's referred to as the closure plan.
And which agency has primary oversight over the closure process?
The DTSC.
Has the closure plan been approved yet by DTSC?
Not yet.
Do you know when DTSC is expected to approve the plan?
We will get it tomorrow. We're hoping to get it tomorrow.
That's based on DTSC stating that they intend to let you know tomorrow?
Correct.
Does Exide need any approvals from the district after it gets DTSC's approval of the closure plan?
Yes, and as Ms. Feldman pointed out, there are two approvals that we need from the district. So the plant operates under Title V. So any modification of equipment needs to have a Title V permit revision. So we need to revise our Title V permit. And we also need the district's approval of the 1420.1 compliance plan for closure activities.
Has Exide submitted that compliance plan for closure activities to the district?
Yes, it was submitted in November 2015.
Has the district provided any indication of how long it will take it to process both the permit and the compliance plan?
Yes, it will take approximately 6 to 8 months once the closure plan is approved by DTSC.
Why is that length of time necessary, as you understand?
Because it's a Title V facility, there is a whole process to revise the Title V process. There is a 45-day EPA review. There's a 30-day public comment period, and the district has to address all the public comments and then issue the permit. So there's a whole sequence to it, and the whole sequence takes about 6 to 8 months.
Now, absent an extension of the abatement order that we're requesting today, would the dust mitigation plan be in place during this interim period?
No. Under the current order for abatement after December 15, we would not have the dust mitigation plan coverage.
Without the extension, can't Exide just wait for the permit and compliance plan are approved by the district before it does anything?
Well, it would create it creates a problem for us. We have a process in place that has been working, and so the closure activities would take a significant amount of time to get done. So it would essentially delay the closure start.
Now, during an extension, if it is granted by the board, would you understand the process to be the same, that Exide would notify the district of specific work and get pre-approval of the sub-plans before instigating the work?
Yes.
Can you please give the board some examples of the type of preparatory work that Exide anticipates doing during this interim period?
So in order to get the closure process started, we cannot just start closure overnight. We need to bring equipment. We need to clear areas of the site so that the contractor can come in and bring the construction and removal equipment. We need to start cleaning some buildings, again, to get ready for closure. We need to seal the floors to make sure that there is no water that makes it through the floors. We need to remove non-essential items, so mostly housekeeping, preparatory activities, and pre-construction activities.
Can you give some examples of the type of work that you do not anticipate doing during this period?
So we would not be doing any work that would be associated with a modification of our Title V permit, which means any ducting. Our Title V permit covers baghouses, and so we cannot touch or modify any ducting that's associated with the permitted baghouses, because that would be a deviation from the permit. So any ducting, any removal or modification of permitted pieces of equipment, we would not do that. The enclosure building, which is a permitted unit, we cannot modify it either. So we would not be doing any modification of the enclosure building, and also we would not be modifying the way we monitor for negative pressure.
Besides these preparatory activities, are there other things besides closure-related activities for which the extension is needed?
Yes. So we are ordered to do sampling by the DTSC. So there is work that we need to do for DTSC. And we also have maintenance activities. There are systems running, and we need to maintain them, and we also need to keep doing the dust suppression activities required under 1420.1.
So is it correct that Exide is requesting the modification to go through the earlier of when the district approves the Rule 1420.1 closure plan, or September 29th of 2017?
Yes, that will give us enough time to get all the necessary approvals.
Thank you. No further questions.
Ms. Feldman?
Yes, Mr. Sirius, are there monitors located at the Exide site to test for lead emissions?
Yes, we have a network of ambient air monitors.
And have any of those monitors showed any lead readings that exceed rule limits, permit limits, or health standards since the last hearing on this matter last February?
No, there has been no exceedance of ambient air standards.
I have no further questions.
Mr. Sirius, let's see, I think you told us that Tetra Tech is monitoring the work activity on the mitigation plan?
That's correct.
And district inspectors are dropping by once, twice a week?
AQMD inspectors?
Yes, I'm sorry.
Yes. I would say at least 3 to 4 times a week, every other day, at least.
And the purpose of they're stopping by is to also monitor the activities?
That's correct. That is correct.
What about DTSC?
DTSC, so there are two groups at DTSC involved. There is enforcement. Enforcement will come, I would say, every 3 to 6 months. And if we have work that is ordered by the DTSC, such as soil sampling, for example, or any drilling for soil sampling, DTSC will have a geologist on site to do the monitoring.
See, and you testified that there have been no exceedances of the lead air quality standard?
That is correct.
And how do you know this?
Because I get the results of the ambient air readings. I get them every day. Every day to every other day, I get them directly from the laboratory. And so I review them regularly and also prepare the reports, and which are sent at least weekly to the district.
Who is doing the monitoring?
It is a contractor called Almega.
Anyone else have any questions? Ms. Prusek?
The pre-closure activities that you listed, bringing equipment on, clearing areas on the site, cleaning buildings, sealing the floors, removing non-essential items, those are not and should not be part of the closure plan that was submitted with DTSC?
Some of these activities are part of the DTSC closure plan, and that's why we would not be doing them today. We would start doing them once the DTSC closure plan is approved.
And they would not be would they be part of the district's closure plan, the 1420.1, or only the Title V aspects?
Not the preparatory activities.
Okay, so none of the things that you listed would be part of that plan?
Correct.
Okay. I just had one other question. Mr. Parker asked you how long you wanted the modified order to be in effect, and he listed 2 dates, one being the approval of the 1420.1 closure plan by respondent or September 29th, 2017, whichever occurs first, but you have a third listed here, which is initiation of the approved DTSC closure plan, which requires a third-party dust mitigation oversight contractor. Under what circumstances would that occur where you would initiate the approved DTSC closure plan without the district-approved rule? Would that occur?
Mr. Parker?
Ms. Prusak, I was going to explain that in my summation. That actually is a lingering element from the prior approval. So we do not request that to be a condition or a termination of the extended plan. It somehow filtered through in our request from the prior time when there was an issue of DTSC possibly approving and us starting up with a third-party monitor at that point. So.
I see. Okay, so we're just going to be one or the other?
Correct.
Whichever occurs first. Okay, thank you.
Anyone else have any questions? Senator?
What are the particles of concern to you, and that's part of the dust that's airborne?
It would be lead and arsenic.
Lead what?
Lead and arsenic.
Is there an oxidation temperature for the lead in the soil? Are you aware of it before it becomes airborne?
So both the lead and arsenic would be in elemental form, and because of the history of the site, there is
Because of the what?
Of the history of the site.
Yeah.
There is a potential for lead to be in the soil or in any dust that could be kicked off during construction activity.
So it became airborne during the process of extracting the lead from the battery to be
Correct.
put in bills and shipped off to someplace else.
That's how it happened over the years, yes.
So this has been going on since 1922, almost 100 years.
Yes.
Okay. Are we to assume, based on your testimony, that there's also, although AQMD is concerned about the air, in the soil, you said that may be contaminated as well.
Yes.
Do you anticipate this is going to be part of the closure, the air and the soil? Do you anticipate any excavation necessary in order to remove the contaminated soil?
That will be up to DTSC. So tomorrow we will know if the DTSC requires any excavation, and if it does, what would be the extent of the excavation.
Do you know there's been any analysis of the soil to determine whether or not it's...
Yes. Yes. Sorry. I'm sorry.
Has there been any, has the soil been analyzed to determine whether or not it's been contaminated? Yes or no?
Yes.
And is it a level where it could be harmful to the environment?
Yes.
Okay. In the surrounding area, are there people living in that area? I don't know. I haven't been there.
I believe there is a 1 mile buffer between the plant and the first residence.
To your knowledge, 'cause I'm just new on this project, have there been any complaints about health problems associated with people living in that area?
Yes, there has been many complaints.
Now, AQMD could not have been responsible for maintaining air quality in 1922 because they were not in existence then. But when did, to your knowledge, then AQMD became responsible for monitoring the air in the area?
I want to say in the 60s.
Then let me ask you another question. Why does DTC preempt AQMD in determining that you should close post haste?
So DTSC is what is considered the lead agency, but DTSC certainly does not have jurisdiction over air issues. They have jurisdiction over soil contamination and groundwater quality, and anything that could impact the groundwater quality. But AQMD has jurisdiction over air quality matters.
It says here that the stakeholders and DTC, DTSC, and the public want to see this place shut down post haste. And it also says that AQMD would not object to that.
Senator,
Huh?
Senator, the purpose of this hearing today is for the hearing board to decide whether or not to extend the existing order for abatement.
I'm trying to get to that, Mr. Chairman.
Plant, as you heard earlier, has been shut down for quite some time.
Since March 14, 2014.
I understand.
And so our
Well, I'm sorry, Mr.
job this morning or this afternoon is to determine whether or not the order for abatement should be extended to facilitate the further work that is needed.
Mr. Chairman, your point's well made. However, I was trying to clear in my mind, they've had one extension, another extension, and some of these plans, the dust mitigation plan, is just being presented, and they took action to proceed to shut the place down 2.5 years ago. So I'm just trying to figure out in my mind when this is going to end, how much time it's going to take to get all these plans in place. Otherwise, the one-year extension is not realistic. If the plans got to be approved by DTSC and AQMD and then back and forth, and each area that's to be mitigated. And I'm just trying to find out in my mind, is it clear with this gentleman that this one-year extension would be sufficient to accomplish preparing all these plans and getting them approved by DTSC and AQMD and shutting it down as been requested by TTSC, the public, and the stakeholders?
Mr. Parker?
Mr. Chairman, would it be helpful if I gave a little more background on the plans?
I think so.
Okay. For the board's benefit, the mitigation plan that is in place now was originally put in place at a time when the facility anticipated reopening. There were significant construction projects that were in there, which was the original purpose of the mitigation plan. Once the facility decided to shut down permanently and not reopen, it then had legal obligations to the Department of Toxic Substance Control, which it was under permit with, and to the district. So it then promptly began the process of all of those legal requirements. And at the same time, it kept this mitigation plan in place so that anything that was happening on the site would be done, for instance, if there were drilling required by the DTSC or any other activities that could generate dust, so that there would be this extra protection in place with the third-party monitor funded by Exide but hired by the district, who reported to the district and made reports available to the public. So it's not actually part of the closure, ultimate closure of the facility that this is intended to cover. This is, and the reason it is only to last a year is because that will allow the district to go through its approval processes so that there will be this added protection of the mitigation plan throughout that year. In the unlikely event that there is a delay required beyond that, I believe that Exide and the district would likely come in and ask for that to be further extended, because we're cooperating at this point to make sure that until we get into the closure plan involving taking down all the buildings, that there's this coverage of these sub-mitigation plans and the third-party monitor. The final plan that's been submitted to DTSC and submitted to the Air Quality Management District has similar provisions in it, that before work is undertaken, specific plans will be approved by both regulatory agencies to make sure that in the process of taking the building down or doing whatever work the DTSC requires, that that dust is not kicked up in that process. So that's the purpose of this plan today. This dust mitigation plan is not intended to cover additional on-site work, which is what we're talking about here, like the taking down the buildings, for instance. Nor does it cover off-site work. That's part of what the DTSC is determining needs to be done.
Thank you. That explains a lot that I didn't know, and I'm more informed. And my final two questions is, the third-party person that you can bring aboard to assist in monitoring this closure, has that person been assigned to the project yet, or you don't know?
Well, so during the order for abatement extension, it would be the same contractor, Tetra Tech, that would do the oversight.
So
the contractor was selected.
right, so when was it determined that the third-party contractor would be needed? Because it's been a long time, 2.5 years.
It was determined at the time of the, when the initial order for abatement was adopted, and correct me if I'm wrong.
2.5 years ago.
Yes, 2.5 years ago.
And he has not been appointed yet.
No, if I could ask the witness a question just to clarify. Mr. Serias, has Tetra Tech been involved in overseeing for the last 2.5 years when activities were undertaken under the mitigation plan?
Yes.
Is it your understanding that Tetra Tech was approved by the district hearing board at the time of the initial abatement order, and that was a condition of that initial abatement order?
That's correct.
Thank you.
Sounds good. I'm just trying to come up to speed. One final question. Was the order to close this plant made by the court of law, or was it made by an agency?
My understanding is that it was an agreement with the Department of Justice.
Department of Justice.
Correct.
And I can only say that as I learn more about this case, that would take the Department of Justice, not AQMD, and not the other agency, to shut this place down. Doesn't look good for the record.
May I say, we were at the time hearing a separate order for abatement. We were having proceedings, and the aim was, of the district, was to either require a complete revamp of the systems or to shut down the facility. So that was ongoing when they determined on their own to shut down.
What if the Department of Justice shut them down?
Any other questions? Thank you very much. Any other witnesses, Mr. Parker?
No, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Ms. Feldman?
The district does not intend to call a witness, but we do have an engineer here, the assistant DEO, in fact. If you have any questions about timing or the district's participation or approval of the plan.
Anyone have any questions of the district witness? Senator?
Any questions of the district witness?
Do you have any questions for the district witness? No. Thank you. Okay. Is there any member of the public who wishes to testify in this matter? Okay, hand your yellow cards to the clerk, please. When you testify, state your name, spell it, and then, did you take the oath when I administered? Okay. Whoever, any members of the public who wish to testify, I'm going to administer the oath at this point. Raise your right hand. Do you promise to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God? I do. Thank you. Okay, after you state your name, spell it, and indicate for the record whether or not you took the oath, you each will have 3 minutes to speak.
Thank you. My name is Susana Ybarra, S-U-S-A-N-A. Last name Ibarra, Y-B-A-R-R-A. I'm a resident of the city of Vernon. I live 2.3 miles from the Exide plant. Our property, I represent the Ybarra property, which is 3 properties, exceeds the 1.7 limit that was incorporated. In February 2016, the city of Vernon houses, their houses, were tested. 10 houses were tested, 10 houses had 100% contamination. I've been asking for my house and our property to be tested, but the AQMD keeps repeating that it's 1.7 miles and the air does not come into our area. The city of Vernon did test one of our properties and our property is contaminated. The Ybarras have been in Vernon since 1863. We've been in that property the late part of 1890s to the 1900s. We have 3 generations of Ybarras on that property, and we've constantly had children coming in and out. We had a lot of dirt. We're contaminated, but yet I can't get the AQMD or anyone to take responsibility for the lead contamination on my property because it exceeds the 1.7 miles. I've written a letter to Santiago. I've written a letter to the governor. Everybody keeps repeating the 1.7 miles. Everybody keeps repeating the air does not come into our part of Vernon. And I'm just here to say the air does come over. The housing, the city housing, why they got approved for testing their property, and not the only residents in Vernon. We're the only private residents in Vernon, and we could not be tested. And I don't understand why. I do have 2 grandchildren who have very low focus. As they went through school, they were given the extra hour of testing, the extra training. We never tied it into the possible lead contamination, but after reading all the things that are included, it's a possibility. I have a daughter who's will have a baby in January, and just recently had a baby 2 years ago in 2014, and was playing outside in the dirt, and we knew nothing about it at that time. So I'm really concerned. And to hear that this is going to end soon when the only resident in the city of Vernon where Exide does their manufacturing or whatever cannot be tested, and why it was approved for the city housing and not approved for the only residents in town. This is my last effort of communicating and documenting our issue. We do exceed the 1.7, and the air does flow in our property. Thank you.
Thank you. Please stay at the podium. Ms. Feldman?
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much for coming to testify here today, Ms. Ibarra. I know it's hard to get to Diamond, far from where you are. The 1.7 miles, is that the mileage that was established by DTSC for soil sampling of the homes? Right. So you understand that the AQMD does not have jurisdiction over the soil contamination. That is a plan that was established by the Department of Toxic Substances Control, and they're the ones who set the boundary for soil sampling. Have you contacted DTSC?
Yes.
And their response was simply that it was beyond the 1.7 miles.
And the air does not go into our direction.
Is it the, so they're saying their monitoring of wind patterns would indicate that your soil should not be contaminated. I understand. I think if maybe you meet with some of our district staff after the conclusion of this hearing, we could at least make sure that you're contacting the right people at DTSC to see if there's anything that can be done for you.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Parker?
No questions, thank you.
Ms. Ibarra, who at DTSC told you the air doesn't flow that way?
The phone number that we're told to call in the information, I didn't bring it with me, but the announcement of the DTS information that goes out, anybody, anytime I call that office, that is, the first time I called, they said there's no residents in Vernon. When I tried to explain to them and give them my address, they said, well, it's beyond 1.7 and the air does not go into your direction. It's always been somebody from the phone number that I've called from DTSC.
First 20 years of my life, I lived 3 miles downwind from the plant.
Oh.
I know what you're talking about. Dr. Lerner?
Have the children in question that you're concerned about, your grandchildren, I think, have they been tested for lead?
I'll have to go back and ask my daughter, but I did mention to them that they do need to be tested. And what the doctor said is the 2-year-old, it is part of the 24-month test, so he'll be tested soon. And then when I found out about unborn children was in September of this year. DTST presented it to us, and that really shocked me. So my daughter did bring it up to her pediatrician, the doctor, the obstetrician that's watching her, and so they're monitoring that right now.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Senator?
Ms. Ibarra, have you heard of Hila Solis?
I'm not sure.
She's your kind of supervisor, kind of Los Angeles. Sympathy ear. And I'm going to say this. Tell her you know me, Nate Holden.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Prusek?
I just had a quick question. First of all, thank you for coming today. I think you were here for the hearing, and so I'm hoping you understand what we're considering today, which is to extend the order for abatement that's in place to ensure that a third-party monitor remains in place under the supervision of the district, and that the dust mitigation plan, as has been followed, stays in place to ensure that additional lead or arsenic do not travel. So I assume you would be in, or I won't assume, are you in favor of that? I just wanted to.
It sounds like they have everything. The only thing that concerned me was the eradication from the soil. I didn't hear that addressed. I think they said they would, eradication of the soil, because that's where the contaminants go. That is what's contaminated, wasn't going to be eradicated. That's the only thing I was waiting.
Right, but because we're their district, we're here
Right.
considering just air, making sure that there's no airborne dust from any activities.
Considering the mitigation plans that I've seen and heard, I believe it's covered.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Berg?
The whole issue of environmental compliance and the environmental regulatory framework is very confusing for the public, and I feel for you. Today, we're not talking about the contamination of the soil because this is not the jurisdiction of the agency that's before us, but I really urge you to talk to the district afterwards, because sometimes within the agencies, they have contacts that maybe you may not get from the outside, so I
So
really
in
encourage you.
speaking to the district, who would that be?
The Air District, I'm sorry, South Coast Air Quality Management District. And Ms. Feldman suggested that you speak with one of the representatives afterwards. I would really push you to do that.
I will, thank you.
Any other questions?
Thank you.
very much. Any other member of the public wishing to testify? Did you fill out a yellow card? And anybody else who's filled out a yellow card, please give them to the clerk of the, at this point. Is your microphone on? The
Good afternoon. My name is Richard Morrow, RACHARD MURO, and I'm also one of the owners of the properties that are contaminated.
You took the oath, sir?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
I have a packet here for each and every one of you, 8 packets, and a picture, if you would like to see, of what's contaminated.
Hand it to the clerk, please.
Thank you. And that's just to show everyone that what's contaminated, and we haven't got anyone to clean up the place at all. We can't get any answers as to when it's going to be taken care of or cleaned up at all.
Anything further?
And I did like what this gentleman said, that when is all this going to come to an end? And we have the same question, is when are we going to get taken care of? Here we are discussing that Exide is going to be cleaned up, and what about the public? What about my location? And also, the reason why you don't have more people here is because you're so far away from East LA. Yes. There should be taken toward that area so that you can have more people give you input as to what's really going on down there. And no one is taking care of the matter. I agree a lot with what this gentleman said, that they should already be shut down a long time ago. It's been lingering on, and nothing gets done. That's my comment.
Thank you. Ms. Feldman?
No questions, thank you.
Ms. Parker?
No questions, thank you.
Ms. Prusak?
Like the last witness, were you told that you don't fall within the boundaries with which DTSC would
I have a
help?
packet that confirms that we're contaminated
Okay,
on Thompson Avenue.
so you don't have that same issue? It's just a matter of
contaminated.
when, and you haven't heard?
It's contaminated,
Okay,
yes.
okay,
But we can get a definite answer as to when it's going to get cleaned up.
okay.
And you have a picture there also of the location.
Yes.
And the part of the yard that's contaminated. We also have pets that are in the yard. My wife, who works in the yard. So it's a great concern.
I hope it resolves quickly, for sure.
I hope so, but nothing's getting done. Maybe here's a time to start here, and maybe you guys can help out a little bit and see when they're gonna go and actually tear down our yard. Because as you can see the pictures, we eat off of our garden. So we've been throwing everything in the trash. It wasn't confirmed that it was contaminated until after the end of October, so everything started going into the trash can, all our fruit and vegetables. And everyone does have a picture, correct?
Yes,
I have it. There's 8 copies out there. Everyone should have one.
we do. We're going to mark this as a public exhibit and make it part of the record.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
It'll be marked as Public Exhibit 18. With respect to your comment about the location of the hearing, the prior hearings that have been held in this matter have been held as close as possible to the facility and to the neighborhood. I recall going to those hearings and participating in the hearings. We have made it possible for members of the public to that were not able to be here today to view the proceedings through a webcast.
Some people don't have access to a computer in East LA. Some people just don't have access.
There's a library,
Yes.
isn't there? Is there a library?
Yes, sir. Yes, there is. Yes. Even though nothing gets done, we don't have any cleanup yet at all.
I agree with you that
But here we are.
the contamination is.
But here we are. Excite is going to get in the cleanup stages. And the public, what about the public? Nobody puts their foot down and says, you know what, we got to take care of the public because we have children there, we have the schools, the parks, and nothing gets done.
To the extent that the Air Quality Agency was able to do something, this board, the agency, requested this board to issue an order for abatement to stop the air emissions. And eventually, the plant was closed down a couple of years ago. What remains is to make sure that as the equipment and the buildings are taken down, that there is no further dust going into the air
Thank you.
that would
Thank you.
further contaminate. And that's what this extension today is for, to provide for that. As Ms. Feldman indicated to you, as far as the soil, what is in the soil, that's going to stay there until it's cleaned up. That is not a matter, the Air District does not have jurisdiction over that. The Department of Toxic Services of the state does, and it is they who have the responsibility to see that it's cleaned up.
I understand. But since we can't get no answers out of here, our desperation is just come in here, start here. Maybe someone can help.
I understand.
This
And
gentleman has a very good perspective on helping the public. Yes.
he gave you a contact point.
Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else? Dr. Lerner?
Just for the record, how old are your children? Are they living with you?
My godson, who lives across the street, grew up there, and my daughters are fairly over age. They're 20 and 30, an estimate, rough estimate.
And you have a godson?
Yes, sir.
Okay,
Who grew up in the area, on my property, yes.
thank you.
And this document was sent to, I see it's addressed to someone at California Department of Toxic Control. Does that mean it was actually mailed there? The document that you provided to us has an address to Sarah Cromie at the California Department of Toxic Substance Control. Was that sent there?
Most likely, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And have you been in contact with that individual?
No, I can't get an answer. It's difficult for us to get an answer. We need someone with authority to give them a call and put their foot down. I would imagine this gentleman would be the perfect one to do. And other than that, we're not going to be heard. They're not going to listen to us. It's going to be a difficult
I don't want to
process.
give this to the district, but
This has been lingering on for so much time. It's so frustrating. And the fact to know that they're going to tear up our yard, it's horrible. So much work is going to go down the drain.
okay.
So much fruit and vegetables are going in the trash. That's just disgusting.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
You point to me, you said I should make a call. It's not dealing with the air, which dealing with the soil, if I'm authorized to do so, I would do that regarding the soil.
Why I pointed to you was because I like the comment that you made. Why is this isn't over yet? Why is all this
I'm
taken
going to
care
give
of?
you a telephone number. Write it down.
Sure.
213-974-4111. 4111.
4191?
4111. That's your supervisor. She can contact anybody in the state of California.
And I should
Gila
tell them
Solis.
referred by?
Gila Solis. She's been a congresswoman as well. She knows her way around this state. You listen. You call. Tell her what your problems are.
323-881-4030, if I recall.
213.
That's also a number that I've called, yes.
213
974-4011. I've called those numbers too. I've called them. Yes.
4111.
I'll try a second, I'll try a second time.
All right.
Any other questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I have one more card. Roger, looks like Noor, N-O-O-R.
Hello, I just wanted to ask a couple questions. One of them was in.
Excuse
regard-
me.
Oh, I'm sorry, my name is Roger Noor,
Spell it.
N-O-O-R.
You took the oath?
Yes, I did.
Thank you.
Okay. I wanted to ask Exide if Tetra, have you worked with Tetra before it was mandated that it was going to be a third party that had to be tested, that had to do the testing? Nicholas?
Mr. Noor,
May I ask that or no?
no. You can testify, you can tell us things, but perhaps after the hearing, you might contact Mr. Parker and he can,
Oh, okay.
he can tell you if they have information that they're willing to give you.
Oh, okay. And well, I also wanted to know if any of the workers that are still working there, including the testers, because it's not mandated that they be tested for lead poisoning also. You know, if they're doing the testing and they're on the ground over there 40 hours a week, that they should be tested even if it's not mandated by any regulatory agency to see if they're getting poisoned, and then how severe that level is. Another thing is that I want to know is, I mean, it's really interesting that DTSC has a circle, a radius of 1.75 miles, all the way directly in the center, and then when anybody calls up and says, hey, my house is contaminated, it's beyond 1.75, then they said, oh, it's the wind. So, I mean, wouldn't it be more like an egg shape, and it wouldn't be in the center, you know, they made it a circle, I mean, a radius, and then now they're saying that it's a wind. I mean, like, they didn't think about the wind factor. They didn't take that into account the first time. It was a real head scratcher for me. And I wanted to know if the protocols was that. I'm sorry, there was one more thing. Oh, and the meetings, they can never be closer to there, because I'm sure the Father John over at the Resurrection Church, he's got plenty of room, and you guys can't have like a little setup meeting in that area, because you will be amazed on how many residents would show up to these meetings if you made one effort to go over there. And I'm sure I can find, if you can't find it, I can find locations for you over there that people would be very happy to sponsor you guys to going over there and talking, and then hearing the real public, because the public really, I mean, people over there, they have more bicycles than cars sometimes, I mean, in some areas. So I'm sure there will be a conservative effort. I mean, and they think that you guys are really helping, because SCAQMD, a lot of people turn to you because they're running into walls with DTSC. So they're thinking of you guys as like the last effort, just like these guys are, because they keep on running against walls. And one person asked me this before, and I couldn't answer it, because the way that these numbers are looking about the testing and how long it's going to take to remediate, it's looking way more than 10 years to do the remediation. I mean, even closer to 20 to 30 years, which is an outrageous number for me to even state. Okay, I mean, I've been telling people, yeah, it's going to take more than 10 years. But if you look at the numbers and how many houses are affected, it's going to take a lot longer than, I mean, so if we can expedite, and somebody asked me, can we get somebody like the Army Corps of Engineers to come in? And then, because these these houses have to be remediated as soon as possible, or the properties do. Is there any way that you can bring the federal government in here besides their money?
I think most of your questions need to be directed to the the State Department of Toxic Services, and I hate to say that, it's like passing the buck. However, I did want to address your question regarding the place of our hearings. We have had, this is not the first order for abatement nor the first hearing we've had in this matter. We've had quite a number of hearings.
Right.
All of them, I think all of them, previously had been held in the community. I remember, I think it was the city council chambers on one occasion. I think that the last one was in city council chambers. Another one that I remember was at Cal State Los Angeles, which is 6 miles from the plant, some distance, but a lot closer than here. And the last hearing that we held was not very well attended, actually. That was in the city council chambers, and all of those hearings are publicly noticed, and there are flyers that go out into the community announcing the location. So the reason we went out into the community is to get the information directly from to get some information directly from the residents in order to make our decision as to whether or not to issue an order for abatement requiring controls of the emissions to the atmosphere, and if so, to what extent, what conditions should we put on this. And that testimony that we had in some of the hearings, there's quite a number of people in attendance, and that really helped us formulate the order for abatement. So we did do that. Today was, an extension of something that's in place now, and given the time of the year and the fact that the order expires in just a few days, and we had to get this hearing done, and so this was the best time to do it. Had we waited, it would have expired, and that would have been not a good thing.
Two comments or answers for that. Well, one of them is that a lot of people didn't know about this before because it would have been any time that a lot of people are awake now because of the school. When the school started, some schools were shut down for the first day, and you should have seen how many people were over at the meeting for the Exide plant right after the school was postponed for opening. You're familiar with that, right? Mm-hmm. And if you interviewed anybody over there, close to 80% of the people would say that they never even heard about the Exide plant before, so they didn't know anything about the public meetings or anything else. And now that because their kids are showing back up at home, and they're saying, "What are you doing at home?" They said, "Well, the school wasn't open today." That was a big shocker, and a lot of people had no clue in regards to that. And the second thing is about that third party, so you're not going to ask, you can't ask. You can't ask if anybody, if they have
Mr.
private
Chairman,
relationships.
I know it's unconventional, but just to assure you, before Tetra Tech was selected, and this was some years ago, Tetra Tech was selected to be the third-party monitor by the district, and we did a background to make sure that they had no conflict of interest, had no prior business dealings with Exide before they were selected.
Because I worked with Tetra Tech, and they do a lot of business over in the city of Vernon.
Yes.
So, okay.
But not with Exide.
Okay, Ms. Feldman, did you have any questions of the?
I was a subcontractor for them also. I still did some work with them.
Ms. Feldman, did you have any questions?
No questions, thank you.
Mr.
Not for this.
Just a second. Mr. Parker, any questions?
None, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Board members, any questions? I did want to make one final point. Those hearings that we held in the community, they were on Saturdays. So.
Those are great days to have them.
Except for soccer. Thank you very much for your
You're
testimony.
right. Thank you.
Any other member of the public wishing to testify in this matter? If there's anyone else, please submit your yellow card now.
Hello, my name is Cindy Muro. That is C-I-N-D-Y, last name M-U-R-O.
You took the oath, Ms. Muro?
Yes, I did.
Thank you.
Okay, so I would like to make a comment about what the engineer, I believe Nicholas, said about, to his knowledge, there's only contamination within a 1 mile radius. However, our property is within 4 miles of Exide, and our property is also contaminated. So if it is above 80 parts per million, it's considered contaminated. Our property goes up to 308 parts per million, which is very concerning. This has been going on for almost 100 years, as Mr. Holden mentioned earlier. And it's very concerning because, as some of you mentioned, there's been previous extensions already, and DTSC actually released a report of different violations that they've found in part of Exide. For example, in 2010, there was 3 violations, and they were fined for $72,000. In 2011, 3 violations. 2012, 4 violations. 2013, 5. 2014, 4, and lastly, 2015, there was 8 violations, and they were fined for over $500,000. So I agree that this should be cleaned up and Exide should be closed properly to make sure that there's not further contamination. However, how many more extensions are they going to receive? This isn't the first, and it's concerning for us because, as another person mentioned, there isn't cleanup of the public. However, we're providing all these extensions for Exide to close. And to a point that the gentleman made, they're releasing reports to the district about what progress is being made. How can the public be made aware of those reports and what progress is actually being made? And who is going to be holding them accountable? How many more extensions are they going to receive if this is not done within a timely manner? I believe the date was set at September 2017. I would like to know, if it's not able to be answered now, at some point, who is going to hold them accountable? Is it the district? Do we need to go to DTSC? Because I've actually spoken with Ila Solis, who is my county supervisor. I met with her deputy, Teresa Villegas, and I also work for Congressmember Karen Bass, and I'm not able to get any answers. So I know that if I have all these resources and I'm not having my questions answered, other public that does not have access to these resources definitely are not getting any answers. So if not here, I want to know where I can get these answers.
Thank you. Ms. Prusa? Mr. Parker, any questions?
No, thank you.
Ms. Prusa?
I just wanted to clear up something that I think might be a confusion. When we talk about extensions and what we're determining today, it's different than the extensions that you are talking about. The extensions I believe you're talking about are the extensions for the closure plan and getting that closure underway, and hopefully including remediation of properties around the plant as well. That's not, unfortunately, within our jurisdiction at all. What we're being asked to consider today is an extension to an order for abatement that's been in place for 2.5 years. As Mr. Parker was explaining, it was originally put in place before the plant was going to close for good, and now it's in place since the closure has occurred, and we're just waiting for the final stages. All it is for, it's very limited, which is why, there's a lot we can't answer to today in terms of soil, in terms of remediation, in terms of any of that. We are limited in our jurisdiction today just to determine whether this one order for abatement, which merely is going to ensure that there is a monitor on site, remains on site whenever there's any activities at the site that could potentially kick up dust, which could potentially have excess lead or arsenic in it, to protect on an ongoing basis the community from any further exposure pending what DTSC is doing. And then, of course, the district, who can't act until DTSC acts. So there are two different things, and unfortunately, we do not have, we're an independent board, even independent of the district itself, so we have extremely limited jurisdiction here. But what we can do is continue to protect the community from further exposure from dust by extending this. So I hope that clears up any confusion on that.
Any other questions or comments? Senator?
Ms. Muro, you said you work for Congressman Bass
Yes, I do.
currently,
Excuse me?
at this time?
Yes.
And you know Supervisor Hiller Solis?
I've met with her deputy director, Teresa Villegas, in the past.
Cindy, her deputy director.
Yes, it's Teresa Villegas for,
Do you explain this set of circumstances to her?
yes, I have.
Karen Bass is my congresswoman. We're here for the purpose that's already been explained about an extension. However, I'm a government agent. You're calling upon me for help. I must tell you that your elected official in Sacramento can memorialize with a joint resolution the Congress to take the appropriate action through the Justice Department if necessary to remedy this situation post haste. It can be done easily. Ms. Bass can do it as well. Ms. Hiller Solis can do that as well. County, state, and federal action to get it done post haste. This long time planning, it can't be closed until the air's dust mitigation has been solved and the soil has been remediated from the contaminants. Otherwise, there's no closure. Those two things must happen. And I understand you've been waiting long enough. And there should be no more, not necessary to wait any longer.
Correct.
You do that.
Thank you.
Anything else? Thank you very much. Appreciate your testimony. Any other member of the public wishing to testify in this matter? There appear to be none. Mr. Parker, you may make a closing statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As explained in my opening and through the testimony of our witness today, we believe that this request for extension of the abatement order is appropriate and warranted under AQMD Rule 806B as a stipulated order of abatement. The conditions that have been provided in the findings and order provide for the same procedure that's in place with respect to sub-mitigation plans for work that's anticipated to generate dust. Also calls for or provides for the district to have the ability on anything in which they disagree to require a mitigation plan to be prepared, and provides for the same third-party monitor mechanism that will cover this extended time period. Therefore, we respectfully submit that good cause is shown and that request that the hearing board grant the request, with the one modification that I had mentioned, and that is there are only, I believe this is paragraph 6 of the findings and declaration. In terms of how long this will remain in effect, it would only be conditions A and B, which are district approval of the Rule 1420.1 closure plan submitted by respondent, or September 29th, 2017. And we withdraw the language that's indicated in section C of that paragraph. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Feldman?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. The district believes that you've heard ample testimony and evidence today that would substantiate good cause for the extension of the order for abatement in this case. We do not object to the modification of paragraph 6 on page 7 of the proposed findings, as indicated by Mr. Parker, to delete subparagraph C. Just to briefly address some of the other things you've heard here today, I think what you've learned, especially the two new hearing board members, is that we have reached a point now with the closure of Exide where we are rapidly losing all control over this situation, and it is being transitioned almost in its entirety to the state to complete not only oversight of the closure of this facility, which must be undertaken with great care and precision in order not to contribute further contamination to the neighborhood surrounding it, but who also has the responsibility to test the soil and remediate the contaminated soil in the residences surrounding Exide. Without providing testimony, only noting what has been published in newspapers, the state has devoted a tremendous amount of resources and money to the undertaking of this project. Most recently, the governor dedicated millions of dollars to the soil remediation project. It is heartbreaking that it's going to take so long. It is frustrating that there are people out there who are still waiting for their homes to be tested for contamination. But this is where we are, and this is the limits of our authority. I think the board has done an admirable job to date in getting this facility under an order for abatement that was as rigorous and expeditious as we could have under the circumstances years ago now, and in modifying that order as needed going forward and having hearings in the community in order to keep everybody apprised of what we were trying to do for them and to keep Exide accountable so that they would never be undertaking any of this without regulatory oversight. And so I appreciate the efforts that the board has taken. That being said, we do stand ready to meet with the members of the community who did testify here today in the hopes of providing them with perhaps better contact information at DTSC so that they can get more informed responses to their questions. As far as this hearing goes, I want to assure the hearing board that not only did we post everything on our website well in advance of the hearing, we sent out postcards as if this was an AB 2588 notification to that radius all around Exide of notifying them of the hearing, and also added to the list anybody who attended, and we had the names of the prior hearings at Exide. So we really did extraordinary outreach for this hearing, which is why I think we actually had more public testifying at this hearing than we did at the last one, which was held at the City of Commerce City Council chamber. So again, I urge the hearing board to grant the extension. It's all we can do at this point. And we will continue to cooperate with DTSC as this facility undertakes its final closure plan. And we will continue to be responsive to the needs of this community to the extent we can, even if it's only trying to point them in the right direction where they can get some answers.
Thank you, board members. I think there's, from what we've heard today, there's good reason to extend the order for abatement. What it does is continues the protections of the air that have been in place as a result of the order. The plant is closed down, has been closed down for a couple of years. Testimony we've heard that exceedances of the air quality standard have not occurred during the period of this order for abatement. It is disappointing that the problem still exists with respect to what is in the soil. That's going to take a long time to correct. The taking down of the buildings and the equipment must be done very carefully in order to avoid spreading dust into the air again. And that's what these plans that are yet to be approved will provide for. Anyone else? Ms. Brusek?
I agree that there's ample good cause. It's the most we can do. It's unfortunately all we can do, is to extend those protections further. It's good to hear that there have been no exceedances, although I think we knew that already. Since this monitoring and dust mitigation plan has been in effect, so it is effective. I know that the public heard that Tetra Tech was approved by the district after rigorous background checks to ensure no conflicts of interests. And I think it's necessary, and without it, I think there is more of a chance of additional exposure. It's unfortunate we can't do any more, but I agree.
Anyone else? Senator?
I would add to that and express an opinion that I'm certain that EPA has a design protocol for the purpose of demolishing structures that have been contaminated. And that procedure hopefully will be followed to the extent where further contamination or exposure is not prevalent in that area, in that community. We don't need any more victims. The individuals that we know of have been victimized for too long and should not be victimized anymore. So let's get this process on the road and make sure it's done properly as quickly as possible to satisfy all parties concerned. As you can see, however, that these 6 findings, every time a modification is being requested, as Ms. Murrow, who works for the Congresswoman, said they had notice of violation, notice of violation, notice of violation. And notwithstanding all the notice of violations and modifications, it took the Justice Department. So somewhere in the local level, the appropriate action appears and therefore could have been taken sooner than later. But it wasn't. We are where we are today, and closure is about to occur according to authorized plan.
Thank you. Ms. Byrd?
This is one of those things that makes me sad from my days of working in the community when community comes face to face with all the difficulties with all the various agencies who cover only portions of the law, but that it is what it is, and I feel for you. I urge you to continue to band together and to do whatever is necessary by talking with those who have the ability to make a change. I believe that there's good cause for this extension. This is an extending of the order for abatement, which means that basically it assures that monitoring will continue. It's not allowing them to do some extra to continue in violation. It's assuring that there will be monitoring on site and that there will be plans that will take into consideration how to effectively close down this plant without further contamination. So I do believe that we can find good cause to issue this modification for this order.
Any other comments? Very well. In the matter of Exide Technologies, case 3151-32, I move that we amend the current order for abatement to remain in effect, and the hearing, let me start that. I move that this order for abatement shall remain in effect, and the hearing board shall retain jurisdiction over this matter until the earlier of A, district approval of a Rule 1420.1 closure plan submitted by respondent, or B, September 29th, 2017. That's my motion. Is there a second? Ms. Byrd?
Second.
Ms. Byrd has seconded the motion. Discussion on the motion? Dr. Lerner, how do you vote? Ms. Prusak?
Yes.
Senator?
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0. Thank you very much. Good luck.
Thank you.
The board will take a 15-minute recess, 17-minute recess, and reconvene at 5 minutes of 3.
No, I did, I'm not telling you now, yeah, he was gonna let me in. Oh. Joe. I'm gonna sit back here. Give me those two, we can. I didn't send it here. Want me to take them out? All right, I'll get my chair back. Yeah, we have a small. I know, I've watched you guys. It's like watching old reruns. I know I was watching the Skywatch, and they're used to seeing me back there.
Seriously, once there is an opportunity, you need to take one section, I don't know, they come back home to their
Sorry, no, we're not supposed to speak, because we're like judges, so we're not supposed to talk to the public separately.
Oh, like right now?
Yeah.
Even him?
Yeah.
Really? I can't get a card, I promise I won't use it, it's just for the conversation. We won't talk to you.
I certainly.
I have to say, I really shouldn't be talking to you. Okay, I understand, but it's not just conflict or ex parte, but it's the appearance of ex parte and, I'm saying it's the appearance of. Let me see what I can say. You can't say anything.
All right, go away.
Thank you.
Oh, man. What am I gonna do?
you're looking for a different job. I said, I just said,
Yes, 12:03? 12:03. How I look on the web, yes.
you just have one copy of that, right?
You may not get to that one. Some extra documents.
Thank you. board is back in session. Next matter is a continued matter, SCAQMD versus Browning Ferris Industries of California, Inc., and Republic Services, Inc., doing business as Sunshine Canyon Landfill, case 3448-14. Who's representing Executive Officer this afternoon?
Nicholas Sanchez and Karen Manwaring on behalf of the Executive Officer.
And representing the respondent?
Good afternoon, hearing board members Tom Bruin, Bill Beck, and Bob Bruni for respondent.
Thank you. Those who will be testifying this afternoon, please rise to be sworn in. Raise your right hand. Do you promise to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God? Thank you. Got one just came in. Okay, where we left off, we had interrupted Mr. Sung's testimony to hear from witness for respondent, and so we're back to Mr. Sung. We've received two documents here. We have a two-page document titled Short-Term Odor Reduction Measures, parentheses, within 6 months. And Madam Clerk, what's the next in order for the district? $37. That will be marked as Exhibit 37 for petitioner. We also have a PowerPoint presentation, the slides for a PowerPoint presentation. It's titled The Intermediate Cover Enhancement. I believe this is also from the district. We'll mark that as Exhibit 38. Thank you very much. Ms. Manwaring?
Thank you, Chairman Camarena, members of the board. Good afternoon. At the conclusion of yesterday's session, this board provided some direction in terms of what information you'd like to have presented. You asked for a timeline to help put into context and understand when the proposed programs would go into effect if this order is issued. And Ms. Prusek, you also asked for some additional information on the ICE program. So what we've prepared to do today is first to present a timeline, and if the board wants to ask questions at that point, we could do that, or we could move right into our presentation on the intermediate cover enhancement. The alternative is we could send you home this evening with that PowerPoint, and you may have be more comfortable asking questions on it tomorrow.
Okay.
So I'll let you decide.
Let's
the time is appropriate.
start off with the timeline and with questions on that, and then we'll decide how to proceed.
Okay. Mr. Singh, could you please state and spell your name for the record?
Eugene Tseng, E-U-G-E-N-E, T-S-E-N-G.
Right. And did you take the oath today?
Yes, I did.
Okay. Referencing Petitioner's Exhibit 37, Mr. Sung, have you had a chance to look at this document and contribute to it?
Yes.
Okay. Is it your understanding that the proposed conditions contained in Exhibit 36, if implemented, some will have near-term implementation and benefits, some will be implemented on a midterm, and some are on a more longer term? Is that your understanding?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Let's talk about what conditions and programs we could anticipate being implemented immediately and what types of benefits may be perceived upon that implementation. So in your opinion, if this board adopts some form of a delayed hours approach to operating hours at the landfill, would that be able to be implemented immediately?
Yes.
Okay. Were you here yesterday to hear about the food recovery program?
Yes.
And what is your understanding about how quickly that could be implemented?
Immediately.
There's been discussion about additional devices, including blowers and orchard fans. Do you have any information about how soon additional misting units may be implemented?
Yes, on the exhibit, item number 3, and number 5. So under number 3, there are 7 additional misting units at the working phase with neutralizer that's already been installed in November of this year. And then and under item number 5, there's another 4 dust box misting systems with odor neutralizer installed at the berm, and that'll be installed by the end of this year. So those are pretty quick.
Okay. And programs that have actually already been implemented, is that your understanding of the well dewatering program? Are those measures currently being undertaken?
Yes, they are. That's an ongoing effort.
Okay. But are there additional measures required per this proposed order?
Yes, there's additional wells, plus I think the evaluation and monitoring procedures are tightened up and more rigorous.
Okay. There is also an odor control study being performed under your direction. Could you remind us what that is and what it's looking to understand?
That is a study. It has been completed. It's in the final stages of editing. It'll be released in approximately 2 weeks. It is in with the local enforcement agency now. What it is an individual facility by facility recommendation to improve the odor mitigation measures at each individual transfer station that takes waste to Sunshine Canyon landfill.
And the recommendations are expected shortly. Upon approval, what is the type of time frame we can expect for implementation of the recommendations that result from that study?
It varies. There are short-term, medium, and long-term. Short-term, it would be like operational procedures and equipment that they could implement right away in terms of monitoring or mitigating the odor. Some of the medium, long-term will require structural changes like construction of within the facility and addition of additional equipment in the facilities.
We introduced this board to the idea of an organics waste diversion program yesterday that was multifaceted. Some of those components, like the food recovery, can be implemented immediately. Some are others are longer term. Let's talk about transloading. First, could you please define transloading in your understanding?
Transloading, in basic terms, is before the materials from the transfer station comes to Sunshine Canyon, the material is actually gone through, and the wetter organic waste is separated out and loaded and onto a transfer trailer that goes to another landfill rather than Sunshine Canyon landfill. So it's a form of diversion of organics from Sunshine Canyon landfill.
And that is proposed to take place at transfer stations that are under Republic's control?
Correct.
Right. And is currently proposed, it is proposed as starting with 2 of the transfer stations, is that your understanding?
Yes.
With the understanding that evaluation of feasibility of rolling it out at all 6 is part of the program?
Yes.
Okay. I would like to draw this board's attention to the metric there that's identified at number 7 on District Exhibit 37. This is the one area that we don't use tons per day. On the transloading proposal, it's a tons per week. We could break that down into a, 1/7 of that or so, if that would be helpful. But I just want to draw your attention to that. We're not trying to hide the ball there. We have also heard discussion about, before I go on from the transloading, in your understanding, are there any impediments to implementing the transloading component of the proposal?
Not really. It's really just adjusting the operational procedure and setting aside specific areas of the tipping floor for handling of these materials. And there may be some minor pieces of equipment that needs to be purchased.
Okay, but in your understanding, no construction and no permits are necessary to implement this component of the organic waste program?
You're correct.
Okay. We've heard lots of discussion about the new cell that the landfill will be opening, referred to as Cell C4. What is your understanding about the development or completing this new cell for
5 years? And I think at least the schedule that I'm seeing is for March of the next year that the operations will start. And this is a very critical area because this is right in the middle of what we call the bow area, the center of the landfill, which has that massive surface area that's where the landfill gas is coming out, and it's in the middle of that area that's been impacted by the 9 inches of compacted daily soil cover.
And is it your understanding that having a new cell a half a mile away based on wind patterns and how odor molecules disperse, would you anticipate that that will have a positive impact on reducing fresh trash odors that reach the Granada Hills community?
Yes, generally, the further away you are, the wind will disperse it better. But you always have these micro meteorological issues on a landfill. But generally, the further away, the better.
So far, we've been talking about programs, steps, conditions, or activities that either have been implemented or can be implemented immediately upon issuance of this order. Number 9 refers to the intermediate cover enhancement, and we're just going to touch on this briefly because Mr. Sung has prepared a PowerPoint presentation to review a lot of that material. But let's talk about that. What part of the intermediate cover enhancement project has already been implemented?
Can you ask that question again?
You probably want me to ask it a different way, too, huh?
Yeah. Yeah.
We're learning to work well together, Mr. Sung. Okay. Let's start with what problem does the intermediate cover look to address?
The intermediate cover covers most of the landfill, and intermediate cover basically is applied to the surface of the landfill for any area where you're not going to be working for at least 6 months. So that's the majority of the area of the landfill. So the purpose of the intermediate cover is it has many purposes. The first of all is erosion control, but it is primarily for the purpose of this discussion is to contain landfill gas odors.
So an effective intermediate cover should impact the degree of landfill gas odors experienced by the community.
Correct.
Right. Is intermediate cover intended to address fresh trash odor?
Well, I'm going to have to say yes and no on that. No.
Help us understand why.
You can have fresh trash or relatively new trash under intermediate cover. And so because it takes many years for fresh trash to break down, it is possible that the odor underlying materials, which are decomposing, creates landfill gas and blow through the fresh trash and actually carry some fresh trash odors with it.
Okay, so to the extent the intermediate cover addresses fresh trash odor, you're talking about molecules carrying odorous compounds through the cover.
Yes, yes.
Now, I had asked you if any part of the intermediate cover enhancement project has already been implemented. Are you able to answer that question?
Yes, I mean, the requirement of the intermediate cover enhancement is better maintenance of the existing intermediate cover, and that is an ongoing effort, and that is a continuing requirement. The intermediate cover enhancement project, or what we refer to as ICE, was approved by the Sunshine Canyon Landfill Local Enforcement Agency April of this year, and it contained many different options of how to improve the intermediate cover. And
Okay, so let's stop there for a moment. A component of the pilot project is to test various substances that could be used as an intermediate cover. Is that correct?
Correct.
So we're not sure, as you sit here today, you're not sure which cover you think will be best applied at this landfill. We're still trying to develop that information?
Yes, we're trying to see which gives the best performance.
Okay. If we knew which cover provided the best performance with the least risks, if we had that information today, could you describe or help this board understand what timeline would be reasonable to think that then this program could then be applied across the areas of the landfill that have been impacted previously by the 9-inch practice?
I'm going to have to give a general answer for that because it depends on the practice that's selected.
Do you mean the material that's selected or something
Material
else?
or the practice, because it's usually a combination. For example, if it's just putting more soil, which is, of course, one of the options we're testing, that can be done immediately.
Okay, let me pause there. More soil. Haven't we heard lots of testimony why 9 inches of soil was a problem? Help us understand why when we're talking about 9 inches with ADC, it's something very different than the option of using soil for intermediate cover.
Very, very different. 9 inches on a daily basis, kept in place, creates those impermeable barriers. And for daily cover, the statutory requirement is 6 inches, okay? But the industry practice is to peel it back. For intermediate cover, and remember what daily cover is, it's daily, it's day to day, every day. So daily cover is actually removed if you're using soil, so you don't have that impermeable layer.
And how long does intermediate cover stay on?
Intermediate cover stays on as long as it takes until they come back. So intermediate cover, by law, goes on, and by law, it is a minimum thickness of 12 inches, and the typical application is around 18 inches.
So if you're using soil as your intermediate cover, those metrics apply.
Yes, because it serves an entirely different function. And when you go back, you actually remove that intermediate cover, scrape it away, just like you would with the standard practice of the industry for the daily cover.
And when you say it serves an entirely different purpose, you mean different than the 9 inch of soil that we heard both serves to keep vectors from rising to the surface and also used for odor control.
Yeah. You know, in some purposes, it's the same to keep vectors out, but because it's going to be there for much, much longer time, the technical requirements are much more strict. So that's why it's a much thicker layer, and there is actually requirements that you maintain the performance of that intermediate cover.
Okay, so by law, they're applying intermediate cover because they have to, but the intermediate cover enhancement project is a component of this order that was approved by the LEA in April?
Yes.
Are there any pending approvals?
Yes, there is a pending approval by the Los Angeles County Department of Public Works, and that is the only approval that we're waiting for.
Okay. And as part of this pilot project, as alternative materials are applied to test their efficacy, will you have, is there a way to sequence or prioritize certain grids to address?
Yes, there is. And I have a presentation later that discusses how we prioritize and sequence this.
Okay. All right. Moving on to the second page, we've essentially covered what either has been implemented or could be implemented quickly. Let's talk a little bit more about mid and long-term measures that are in this, proposed in this order. First, on an ongoing basis, all those measures and more that we've talked about would be continuing in place. Is that correct?
Correct.
Could you summarize some of those practices?
Well, like the...
What are the big ones that we really need to think about that we can expect to have some benefit?
The well dewatering program, the best management practices on the working face, which is to address the fresh trash odor. So those are have to continue over the long term. So.
Okay. Item number 2 on page 2 of District Exhibit 37 refers to expansion of intermediate cover per ICE program recommendations. That's what we were just talking about. Could you help us understand the timeline of when this program could be rolled out, including the enhancements?
The intermediate cover enhancement project basically has a number of selected grids, monitoring grids, about 7 of them. And we're going to be testing different types of measures. So under item 2, the bullet you see, it says completion of study in 6 to 8 months. I took the liberty of actually kind of moving the schedule up because I don't think it takes a really long time to evaluate. We're going to be putting it on a fast track to evaluate it. And if it's,
When you say move the schedule up, do you mean, did you make changes to the proposed stipulated order? Or did you accelerate your understanding of and expectations?
I did both.
Okay. All right.
Okay. Basically, I made it a little bit stricter because I think for some of the proposed methods we're testing, it does not take 6 months to evaluate. I think we can get it done in 2 months and then make the recommendation to go ahead. So I really kind of shortened that timeline up. So that's something I did on my own here.
Okay, thank you for that. Item number 3 on page 2 here. Placement of additional waste with new collection wells in areas impacted by 9-inch cover requirement. Could you please explain what this means?
Okay, this was, I had previously covered this before, and it was also discussed by Neil Bolton. And this is where the majority of the landfill, we have the bow area that we had just talked about, where we have the slopes, because the slopes cannot be compacted as well, and we have the landfill gas emanating through the surface. So one of the remediation measures is actually to fill up against it to allow the gas to go through it and have that new additional waste, which is going to be without the 9 inches of dirt, and we could put a landfill gas collection system in that will capture the gas that would be going through, that's already going through the surface right now.
Mr. Sung, if there was less tonnage coming into the landfill, would the ability to apply waste in these impacted areas as you just described, would that be impaired or slowed down?
Yes.
Okay. You had made a statement sometime to me today that fresh trash odor and landfill gas are just not equal. Could you help me understand, in terms of the proposal to reduce tonnage coming into the landfill, why reducing tonnage would slow the opportunity to implement item number 3 here?
Ask it one more time.
All right. If this board decides to issue an order that reduces the amount of daily tonnage allowed at the landfill, would that impact the ability to implement item number 3?
Yes, it would.
How so?
Okay. This is where, when we look at the best combination of practices, it's important to keep in mind all the factors that are being considered. I actually have a presentation that addresses that approach a little bit later, but I'm going to answer your question in 2 parts, because you had mentioned that I had made a comment that landfill gas odors is different than fresh trash odors, and I think that's lost upon a lot of people. I know they.
Let me pause there. At the conclusion of yesterday, you identified 3 primary odors that these programs seek to address. Could you repeat what the 3 odors we're talking about are?
Fresh trash odors, and that's the odors that you get off the working face when the trucks dump and when it's spread out. Then it's landfill gas odors, and that's the odors that's carried by the decomposing trash in the landfill. From a long time ago, when it decomposes, produces landfill gas, and the odorous materials that comes out with the landfill gas. And so the landfill gas carries it is the carrier gas. So, but we refer to that as landfill gas odors.
Okay, so
And then
leachate?
leachate, fresh trash, and landfill gas.
Landfill gas. Okay. What is your understanding about how a reduction in tonnage, in considering condition number 3 that we're talking about, could you help us understand how reducing tonnage might affect fresh trash odors, how it might affect landfill gas odors, in terms of this idea of using incoming waste to bury side slopes?
Okay. For fresh trash odors, from a very basic approach, you can say less trash, less fresh trash odors.
That sounds like a common sense statement. Have you done any analysis, or do you have any evidence to support that common sense statement?
Actually, I do, in terms of the presentations later. But for the working phase, which you are dumping the trash and then spreading it out, like I said, that size, how much surface area is that is exposed is critical to what is, how much fresh trash odors reaches the neighborhood. And reducing tonnage is only one approach. That goes to the amount of materials that go there. But there are many, many other approaches that are being proposed in this abatement order that
Okay,
should be
before
put
we
in place.
talk about the other approaches proposed in the abatement order that will address fresh trash odor, would a reduction, you've just answered the question that the working face and location of the working face have a greater impact on fresh trash odors than the actual amount of fresh trash.
Correct.
Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. If we reduce the amount of fresh trash, what will the impact be on the ability to use that incoming tonnage to address the areas impacted by the 9-inch cover practice?
Well, you would have less volume to fill up against the sloped areas, directly proportional to the amount that's being reduced.
So perhaps some benefit derived in terms of reducing fresh trash odor, but a cost or a consequence in terms of your recommended solution for addressing landfill gas.
Correct.
Before I move on, was there anything else that you wanted to say on that at this time?
The only was to address that comment is that fresh trash odor is different from landfill gas odors. And from the local enforcement agency standpoint, we consider the landfill gas odor a much more serious problem than the fresh trash odor. If you look at the chemical constituents of the landfill gas, there's a lot of chemicals in there that are actually required to be measured as part of the monitoring program put forth by the district. But for fresh trash, we pretty much know the smell comes from vegetables, fruits, food waste and things like that, or yard waste. Those are pretty naturally occurring, and it's relatively what I'm going to call fresh trash, right? But the landfill gas odor carries with the odors from materials that's, I'm just going to call it stewing for a very, very long time. So an odor complaint to the local enforcement agency that's landfill gas, we consider it much, much more serious than a odor complaint that's fresh trash. Am I explaining that well enough?
You have just explained, in your opinion, why you don't think fresh trash odors are equal to or comparable to landfill gas. Made sense to me, but I've heard it before. All right, let's move on from that subject to the last two. The last two components of the organics diversion program, as you understand them. Now, to be clear, we're not trying to hide the ball. We're not saying that this is 3,000 tons immediately. The alternative organics diversion program is a smaller amount of tonnage that's directed to organic waste, and each of these components has a different timeline. So in terms of the facility, Egremont OC, do you have an understanding, based on the proposal and representations made by respondent, of when they could implement a food waste diversion of 75 tons per day to the Egremont OC facility?
My understanding is that by the second quarter, at the end of the second quarter of next year, that program can be in place.
And do you have an understanding of how the food waste diverted to that facility will be used?
To the Egremont Orange County facility?
Yes.
That'll actually be composted.
Okay. So instead of being deposited in Sunshine Canyon landfill and decomposing into landfill gas, it'll be used as composting. All right. And then the final component, or the fourth prong of the food organics diversion program, is the American Waste Project. Do you recall the deadline included in the order for construction and completion of that project?
Yeah, I understood it to be at the getting implemented in the the last part of 2019, because that does require new equipment and new infrastructure and a permit revision.
Okay, so focusing on the new proposal, the Organics Waste Diversion Program, is it your understanding that the food recovery component can be implemented immediately?
The food recovery program, yes.
And the transloading program that hopes to divert up to 40 tons per week away from the landfill, that also can be implemented in the very near term, within a matter of weeks or months?
Correct.
And these other projects, looks like they'll take a bit of a longer time to develop, but isn't that part and parcel of developing the necessary infrastructure in order to implement state mandates?
Correct. And targets the materials that's, of course, that has the highest amount of moisture.
Mr. Sung, I want to return to our discussions of morning hours, delaying operations. Your testimony was that if implemented by this board, or if issued by this board, it could be implemented immediately. I have a question. After you reviewed the proposal and heard the evidence and testimony and comments by this board, did you recommend any changes to the proposal before this board?
Yes, I did.
Why don't you describe how you modified your opinions based on the evidence and testimony you've listened to?
Okay. Well, under item number 1, I think the ban on transfer stations, for at least for all the transfer stations that's owned by Republic, because they have control over it, I think that should apply 6 to 9, not 6 to 8.
And that's because those are vehicles within the control of Republic?
And then that practice is already being done now. I don't see any reason for backing off that.
And in terms of a traffic analysis, would it be reasonable to think that type of delay might actually reduce peak trip hours?
Yes, and it ought to actually spread that out and push it back a little bit.
Okay. Now, to be clear, have you done that traffic analysis yourself?
No.
No. But it's reasonable to think this delay would have that impact?
Yes, I mean, from previous traffic studies that I've seen.
Okay. Any other modifications to your own opinion or recommendations?
I left the 6 to 8 for the city and all third-party transfer trailers in place. And I think that 8 o'clock was actually recommended by the principal of Van Gogh as the acceptable hour for her. So I agree with the stipulated abatement order to keep that for all other parties. So not 3 hours, but 2 hours.
In your best recollection of the principal's testimony, did that have to do with when recess starts? Or was there some other factor that you understood?
The kids go to, they arrive at the school at 7, but they're all in the rooms by 8.
Okay.
That's
If we
only one
delay
of,
start times, is it fair to say that we are delaying the odors?
yes, you're pushing it back, but also I think you're diluting the odors also, because I think the meteorological conditions change as the hours gets later in the day.
And we also heard a little bit about convection, right? The
yes,
heating?
the heating
Okay.
up of the ground, yes.
So between changes in wind and convection, those also impact the intensity or amount of odors that might be experienced in the community.
Correct.
But if we were to delay, say, later into the afternoon, could that potentially delay odors being experienced when those kids are out at recess? And if you have no opinion on that or don't recall the testimony?
Yeah, I don't recall that one.
Okay. Okay. How about, you've addressed the hours that you would recommend. How about which times of year the protocol would be in place? Do you have opinions about that?
I agree with what's in the stipulated abatement order.
And that is an automatic ban or delay. The delay is in place automatically from October 1 through March 30th?
Yes,
And that coincides with weather patterns that would support that data?
primarily.
What else would support that time period?
Also, school year, and also what we would call the wet season, where you have higher generation of odors.
Okay. Did you hear some testimony yesterday? Did you present some testimony yesterday on wind speeds? And do you recall the questions about Why cut it off at 15 miles per hour? Have you modified your recommendation or made any changes based on those conversations?
Yes, under 1D, in the analysis, in the original version of the stipulated abatement order, there's a cutoff at 15, and at 15 miles an hour. In real life practice, in trying to determine what that 15 mile per hour wind is, that threshold, to be on the safe side, the current practice is actually to cut it off at a much higher level. So it's actually, in real life, already being done at 20 miles per hour or less. So I don't see any reason why not just to put the 20 miles per hour in there.
Okay.
I know it's a lot stricter, and I've actually did the analysis last night to see how many more odor complaints it covers.
You were at approximately 85% at 15 miles per hour. What's your analysis at 20 miles per hour?
It's at around 85 to 90% at 15 miles an hour. It goes up to basically 99% or so with 20 miles an hour.
You also testified that currently Republic is already holding their transfer trailers until 9 a.m. Is that correct?
Correct.
Do you know if they're doing that on Saturdays?
I don't know if they're doing that on Saturdays.
Okay, but under this proposal, they will be.
Yes.
Okay. Have you had an opportunity to assess how many tons of municipal solid waste would be diverted a day that this program is implemented?
I'm looking at just kind of from existing records, and I need to do the independent validation, but I'm estimating around 800 tons will be delayed.
800 tons
a day.
Delayed or diverted?
Delayed.
Delayed, okay. Amongst some of those tonnage, is it your understanding, well, let me strike that. Would you agree that there are 3 categories of haulers that would be impacted by this? Republic, the City of LA, and third party?
Yes.
Okay. Do you have any understanding of what the City of LA Bureau of Sanitation, what they might do if this condition is implemented with their transfer trailers that are delayed to delivering to Sunshine Canyon?
Because of their existing contractual requirements, the way I understand it in my last conversation with Bureau of Sanitation, delays will not be acceptable for a lot of their contracted transfer trailers. So by effectuating a requirement for delay, they're actually being forced to go dispose of it somewhere else.
So as to the city, it is your understanding that a delay is actually a diversion?
Well, it's basically a cut in tonnage.
Okay, so if the city is required to delay delivery to Sunshine Canyon, they would actually divert that tonnage elsewhere?
Correct.
Okay. Of the 800 tons, do you have a sense of what can be attributed to the city?
I don't have that breakdown, but I've asked for that data so I can actually allocate it to the parties.
If I said between 200 and 400 tons per day, would that sound reasonable?
That's a reasonable range because the City of LA is the largest, client or customer outside of Republic.
Okay, so our best understanding of this condition, if implemented, could result in 200 to 400 tons per day diverted away from the landfill, just based on how the City of LA's Bureau of Sanitation would be forced to respond to these changes in operations.
Correct.
All right. As you sit here, do you know if the City of LA Bureau of Sanitation has said, yes, we agree?
No, I do not know that.
You do not know?
No.
Thank you. Okay. There's just one area that I want to go back to before I conclude on the timeline, and that has to do with soil being used in the intermediate cover areas. We talk about alternative daily cover, and we talk about intermediate cover. When we talk about ICE, the Intermediate Cover Enhancement Project, we're talking about evaluating different types of materials. Is that part of the pilot project?
Yes.
All right. And you previously testified today that soil is a material that could be used as intermediate cover. Is that correct?
Correct.
Right. Are there any impediments to or necessary approvals before Republic could use soil on the intermediate cover areas?
they can put additional soil as much as needed without any approval from the Department of Public Works.
So even if there's a delay in implementing the enhancements because another regulatory agency has an opportunity for approval authority, there are things that Republic can do in the meantime.
Yes, I think that authority is under the local enforcement agency.
And would you recommend that they do that?
Yes, and one of the programs that they can immediately do is they don't have to, I mean, they have to wait for approval for some of the other practices with the other materials, but for implementing soil, they can do that like tomorrow, start tomorrow.
All right. I have no further questions for Mr. Sung on the timeline and summary of how these elements would be sequenced. I don't know if you want to now pause to question on this subject before we go on to what will be a fairly lengthy and detailed presentation, hopefully much of which is review, but some of it may help bring some things together on the ICE program. So what's the board's pleasure?
I think we'll pause at this point. Mr. Bruin or Mr. Beck, any questions for Mr. Singh?
No questions at this time.
Board members? Ms. Prusak?
At this time, I'm going to wait for other questions until there's the more lengthy presentation, but I wanted to ask on the expansion of morning hour ban on transfer loads. I thought yesterday your testimony was that the City of LA trucks had a higher percentage or large percent of food waste. Is that correct?
The City of Los Angeles transfer trailers, the city, those are city collected trash, and it's mostly residential, and residential has higher amounts of food. And so by them going away, they're taking a larger percentage of organics away.
So with that said, I am not clear why you would not support the ban until all this, everything else is put in place that can help to divert those organics to 9 o'clock a.m. to ensure that there is actual diversion.
Okay. The impact for 2 hours delay to 3 hours delay is huge on the city. They have lots of there's so many contracts in place within the unionized city. So every one of those contracts and all the work schedules are going to be basically impacted. By keeping it to 2 hours rather than 3, it makes a huge difference in terms of the impact on the overall infrastructure of where everything goes. Because one of the options they're talking about is driving to Riverside to a facility down there. That's a very, very long drive. So like I said, I'm looking at trying to get the maximum amount of benefit with the minimum amount of, well, it's not going to be minimum, but it's going to be minimizing the amount of infrastructure impact, the negative impact.
Are you familiar with the adverse weather protocol that has already been implemented at the facility?
Yes.
Is that till 9 o'clock? That was the testimony. Did that apply to city trucks as well?
She asked for your familiarity. Do you want the information, or are we gonna?
Yeah.
I do want the information, but
If Mr. Bruin
but
has
we
it,
can.
The district would be happy to hear the answer.
My understanding, it's at 8 o'clock.
It's 8 o'clock. Okay, that's not my notes.
I
were
think
9
if you
o'clock.
looked at the adverse weather protocol, it said we would predict the next day between 6 and 9, because that was the time period we looked at for the weather sources. But the actual prohibition on transfer trailers from the city was from 6 to 8.
I'm not talking about in the proposed order for abatement. I'm talking about the testimony that was given about the 2-month or whatever protocol that has already been put in place. That was not 9 o'clock?
I believe it was, for city trucks, transfer trailers, I believe it was 6 to 8.
Good. It doesn't have to be right now, but I'd like that to be clarified, because my next question was the 200 to 400 tons per day that would end up being estimated to be diverted. Is that, do you know, is that estimate that you made based upon, and understanding it's definitely an estimate, but is it based upon this protocol that was put into place for the 2 months, or is it based on something else?
Just as a caveat, I provided the estimate and asked him if he believed it was reasonable.
Yes.
And yes, if implemented, that is an approximate estimate of what the city would divert, not delay.
And you're talking about for 6 to 8 for city trucks and 6 to 9 for public transfer trucks?
Correct.
Okay, and is that based upon, what is that based upon? Is that based upon your estimate, Ms. Manwaring, I guess, that you would
You know,
then ask?
as a caveat, as this board knows, we have worked very hard to coordinate with other regulatory agencies, and there are just some things that we are not able to make representations on. What I'm doing is trying to share my understanding through someone who has expertise as to whether or not my understanding might be reasonable. You can assume that those are based on conversations that we've had with other public agencies.
Okay, I'm just trying to understand, because my recollection was during the, I'm trying to find the testimony, but during the testimony about the adverse protocol, weather protocol that is already in effect, the estimate for what has already been diverted was 400 tons per day. So I wanted to understand it, if that was 9 o'clock, and if we're talking about apples and oranges, or if we can get a better, solid understanding of what we would be looking forward to.
Ms. Prusik, I think the testimony you're looking for was in Dave Hauser's testimony. And I thought he gave a range, but my recollection is not firm enough to tell you what the range was, right?
Okay, I'm going to look for, I'm not going to ask for it right now, but I'm going to ask for it, because I'm looking at my notes, and it said the diversion was until 9 o'clock. That was my notes. And so, and then the estimate of what had been diverted during that time was 300 to 400 tons per day, not coming back to the landfill. So I want to understand if the 400 tons is an overestimate, if that 9 o'clock was correct, and I want to apply it to what is being proposed right now.
If you look at what was marked as Respondents Exhibit 00 on page 4, there are some times and numbers on that page. I don't want to try to summarize Mr. Hauser's testimony. 00, page 4.
Yeah, that's why I'm not going to look right now, given the time.
Any other questions?
I just had a couple of brief questions, and it may be something that would be covered in the presentation on ICE, but this document, the timeline, talks about that LADWP still has to approve something, and I was just wondering what the holdup was for the ICE in the LADWP approval.
I'm going to let Mr. Singh answer that to the best of his knowledge, but with a caveat, there is somewhat of a legal answer. The CUP contains certain conditions that the DPW may or may not apply to changes in the enhancement project. With that caveat that there are some legal answers that you may not be able to fully articulate. What is your understanding about DWP's approvals?
The DWP and the local enforcement agent, we're all part of an interagency working group with AQMD and the lead. And Department of Public Works County has a very different set of land use conditions that apply to the landfills. So what they're doing is they're independently requiring a separate approval process above and beyond what we would be doing through the interagency or as the local enforcement agency for anything that they consider a change in the operations. And so they've designated this intermediate cover enhancement project as actually a change in operations. I don't technically agree with that, but this is one of those things where the regulatory agencies need better cooperation.
Okay.
And so the ball's been in their court since April.
Okay.
And I don't know what the holdup is.
Okay, then my other question is, I wasn't sure what you were saying when you mentioned that the completion of the ICE study from 6 months to 8 months, was that from today, from?
From the start of the project,
Okay.
they would implement something, and after the, and to evaluate it, it was originally 6 months. Well, I don't think as the local enforcement agency, we need to wait 6 months for certain practices. We can evaluate after 1 month or 2 months. And so, and then let's say after 2 months for a certain practice, we say, this is actually a pretty good practice. I don't want to have to wait the full 6 months. I said, if we deem it an improvement, let's just start implementing it on a wider scale and at a much faster pushed-up schedule.
So that's 2 months from whenever it begins?
Yes, instead of waiting 6 to 8 months.
Okay,
Yeah.
Thank you.
Ms. Manwain, I'm assuming Mr. Sung will be here tomorrow?
Yes, he has cleared his day to make himself available, and he may suffer at home for that, but let's see, Mrs. Sung has been very generous with her husband's time. Before we conclude today, I do have an additional PowerPoint to distribute. We knew we wouldn't get to it today. We've got something more important to do, don't we? All right, there's one more exhibit to hand out before we conclude.
Okay. First of all, we have a number of public exhibits, which I will mark at this point.
Got it.
They're not out there.
I'll save my questions till tomorrow then.
Yep. Thank you. Okay, the first one is from Jackie Coons. It was sent Wednesday, December 7th, 2016. It's postmarked, it's not postmarked, it's date stamped today, December 7th. It's Public Exhibit 550. The next one is from also an email from Andrew Crown, sent Wednesday, December 7th, date stamped same time. It's marked Public Exhibit 51. The next one is also an email from Irma Eskandari, sent today, Wednesday, December 7th, and date stamped same. It's Public Exhibit 52. The next one is from Patty Gluck, sent today, Wednesday, December 7th, date stamped same time, day, and it's Public Exhibit 53. And the last one is from Arlene Melkonian, sent Wednesday, December 7th, date stamped same day, and it's Public Exhibit 54. I have the authority to shorten the public testimony, which I will do so today because of the time frame that we have. And the first one that I will call on is Mr. Ralph Croy. Mr. Croy, you will be given 2 minutes. Each of the other speakers will also be given 2 minutes. After Mr. Croy will be Mr. Stephen Beck, followed by Joe Vitti, and then Mr. Wade Hunter. Mr. Croy.
Is this on? Yes, okay. My name is Ralph Croy. I'm an engineer and a former Army officer. Remember, my feeling is, what's the problem?
You took the oath, sir?
Pardon? Oh, yes, I have.
Thank you.
I'll do it again if you want. No. Okay. What's the problem? What's the solution? And do the solution. Getting back into what we have here on item 9 of the exhibit number 35, proposed stipulated odor abatement. The district alleges the odors are the result of insufficient gas solution collection, inadequate treatment of incoming daily waste, and inadequate daily and intermediate cover procedures. And there's more to it than that, but succinctly, that's about it. What's the problem? We stated that. What's the solution? Well, the solution so far that I have seen is there are no hard statements, only what appears to be as suggestions with no hard times and dates in the near term. 3, there seems to be no real hard statement of goals and penalties if goals are not met, and there should be penalties. The new handout is not much more positive than that. Now, as an Army officer, 75 years ago, we were attacked at Pearl Harbor on December 7th. 4 years later, well, on December 8th, we started a plan, and 4 years later, we won the war. In 4 years, we won the worst war we ever entered, and perhaps even the world. We've been playing this game for 20 years or more, and we still haven't solved the problem. I think there should be a shame all around here, including the public and the government. Here we have a problem. It's a health problem. It's a problem of the citizens living, and we haven't solved that problem yet. I think we should look at it. I have a real hard solution. I mean, as an officer, I mean, we had objectives, we had a plan, and you executed the plan. And if you didn't do it, you might be killed. I'm being very blunt. I could use what I call a Napoleonic thing. $100 million, Republic puts up $100 million. They have 1 year to solve the problem. Otherwise, they lose it. Thank you.
Ms. Manwaring? Mr. Beck? No questions. Board members? Thank you. Mr. Stephen Beck, followed by Mr. Joe Vitti, then Mr. Wade Hunter.
I'm sworn. I'm Stephen Beck, S-T-E-P-H-E-N-B-E-C-K. I represent the Legends at Cascades Community Association, Inc. I've moved away totally from what I was going to say, and I'm making it very simple. And it has to do somewhat with the direction that you were going in, Ms. Prusak. With the changes that have been made and what's being offered at this particular time, there seems to be a lot of emphasis on the incoming trash during that time of either 6 to 9 or 6 to 8. During the time when we've already established that there are prevailing winds that come in northerly from north to south. What is not being addressed here is, while that may be abated, what is happening at the landfill during those hours from 6 to 8 and 6 to 9, potentially, if the face is being worked, that is to say, if they've got whatever you call those things, steamrollers, whatever, with the kind of fists that come out of these rollers, and they're punching the ground and moving it around. At that point, whatever cover you had during the night is now being disturbed. And so you are again going to have either the trash odors from the previous day, maybe not new trash odors, but you're stirring up all of that stuff that's underneath the ADC film or whatever's being used in combination of soil. So my point is that just because you are abating the number of trucks coming in at various times between 6 and 8 and 6 to 9, I'm not sure that's going to stop anything if you're going to be working the face. So the question comes back to, shut it down or not shut it down. If you're going to work the face, I still think you've got a problem there. I'm through.
Thank you. Ms. Manwaring? No questions. Mr. Beck?
No questions.
Board members? Thank you. Mr. Joe Vitti?
I was half sworn in.
I saw you coming in the door when you were sworn in, and I saw you took. Would you use the microphone, please?
Okay, I'm not here very often. On Wayne Tasuda's report dated August 15th.
State your name, spell it.
I'm sorry, Joseph Vitti, Joe Vitti, Joevitti, excuse me. On Wayne Tasuda's report dated August 15, 2013, he recommended the use of a gamma density logger to determine the need for additional wells. That same recommendation for using the gamma density logger was repeated in a second report in in 2015, that's 2 years later. Dated September the 15th is a report entitled Sunshine Canyon Landfill Local Enforcement Agency Compilation of Potential Mitigation Practices and Programs. On page 90 of that report, it states that require the landfill operator to recalculate the LFG collection system efficiency at the beginning of each calendar year to take into account the additional landfill gas generated by the increase in the overall in-place disposal tonnage of the preceding calendar year. The data and methodology utilized in the calculation of the LFG collection system efficiency shall be provided to the SCAQMD for distribution and review by the task force members. Require the landfill operator to measure in-place density of trash with a gamma density logger for the purpose of calculating the radius of influence. Both the density of the refuse at different depths and density of the daily cover shall be measured. If the radius of influence is determined to be less than ideal, additional landfill gas extraction wells should be required. Now, the question is, did the operators of Sunshine ever use the gamma density logger to determine the need for additional wells, as they were directed to do, over a 2-year period, ending in the last comments were in 2015? And second, if not, please evidence increasing the vacuum can increase the radius of influence without intrusion of atmospheric oxygen. And two, has the landfill operator recalculated the LFG collection system efficiency at the beginning of each calendar year to take into account the additional landfill gas being generated by the increase in the overall in-place disposal of the preceding calendar year? Sorry, I went over.
Thank you, but I do appreciate that you're providing your testimony in writing, and we're going to mark that as Public Exhibit 55.
Okay.
Ms. Manwaring, any questions?
I do, thank you. It's the first time I've had an opportunity to say hello and question you, Mr. Vitti. And I understand that you spent some time with Mr. Sung at the landfill this weekend, is that correct? Yeah. If you're able, could you briefly describe your own experiences this weekend with odors at the landfill? And what I'm particularly interested in, do you differentiate between fresh trash and landfill gas? And what was your experience on this occasion?
There were no odors, but lots of wind today.
Oh,
So,
okay.
and traveling around, no, we didn't have any. What was the other part of the question?
I was just wondering if you personally feel like you can differentiate between fresh trash and landfill gas.
I think I could,
Okay.
but.
But as on Saturday, it was windy, so you didn't experience either while you were at the landfill?
Right, it was very windy, yes, and I was only there for an hour or so, late in the afternoon.
All right. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to
Yeah, I just
have that experience.
emphasizing the need for this material, which we continually ignored, and hopefully it would bring the need for more wells, which is, I think, a major problem for us.
All right. Thank you very much, sir.
Any questions from Mr.
No,
Beck?
thank you.
And board members? Thank you very much, Mr. Vitti. Okay, we're going to, Ms. Manwaring has some documents. Oh, Mr. Hunter, how could I forget? That was unintentional.
Or a Freudian slip. Thank you, members of the board, for the opportunity to speak. My name is Wade Hunter, W-A-Y-D-E-H-U-N-T-E-R. I am the president of the North Valley Coalition of Concerned Citizens, Inc., and I have been sworn. I really don't have a lot to do. I'm just looking at this list that's being provided by Eugene, and I guess my question here is, yes, he's changing some things, but is this now part of the stipulated order? Do we now have a revised stipulated order that includes his recommendations at this point? Because I guess I'm confused about that. But I'd just like to talk about just a few things. The only real new thing there is basically that the city of LA and third-party transfer trailers, now they're talking 6 to 8. But as we pointed out, this is great for the kids. And you mentioned Miss Maloney, the school principal, said, yeah, hey, 8's fine for the kids. What about everybody else that lives there? You heard of the people out walking their dogs in the morning, they're going to the park, they're going about their business, they're getting in their cars. They're still going to get the stink. So again, it really needs to be extended to 9 o'clock because those trash trucks that are coming from the city, as we well know, coming from Clark's, are loaded with all kinds of trash. It's high and they have a lot of organics and a lot of water. And they're coming in and they smell. So if you dump it at 8 o'clock in the morning, guess what? And that wind's just moving. It'll be there before 9 o'clock, I assure you. So you're not buying as anything. They need to be included in that as well. You don't need any transfer trailers in there until a minimum of at least 9 o'clock in the morning. I also kind of looked at this adverse weather protocol, and what concerns me is they talk about getting multiple sources, NOAA, National Weather Services, Weather Underground, and they say if we get any readings from here, yeah, they're still talking about 15 miles an hour, which obviously now Eugene is recommending 20, and you believe that that's what you'd like to see too. But the problem is, who's recording this? This is their people looking at things and now saying, well, you know, it meets or doesn't meet this, and now we're all suddenly reliant upon somebody. There's no recording of this information. These people aren't trained to begin with. They're just looking at I went and looked at the weather reports, okay? And you know, I don't know that I could make a reasonable decision. As I pointed out to you, it's complex terrain for air quality modeling. So I think they need to have a professional do it for them. So thank you very much for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you. Ms. Manwaring?
I have a final exhibit to distribute, so you can
Any
look at
questions
those.
for?
Oh,
Twice.
Mr. Hunter, you were so patient with my questioning yesterday.
And I apologize for my outburst, by the way. I looked at it last night. And apologies to everybody. It's an emotional issue for us.
I
we
do
understand.
Thank you very much. No questions today.
Mr. Beck?
No questions.
Board members? Thanks again.
Thank you.
Now, Ms. Manwaring, you have something for us?
I'm so eager. Yes, I believe Mr. Sanchez also has some comments. What I'm passing out is an exhibit that's not yet marked that we'll discuss tomorrow, I hope.
Mr. Chairman, while Ms. Marinori is passing out this document, I wanted to confirm that I've talked to my client. We're willing to stipulate to changing the adverse weather protocol so that it's 20 miles an hour would be the definition of an adverse wind velocity rather than 15 miles an hour.
Thank you.
And I believe we also reached stipulations on the differentiation between the different transfer trailers, city versus.
Yes, we did.
So we would also stipulate that for the city and independent haulers, those hours would be between 6 and 8 a.m., and all the Republic transfer trailers would be delayed to 9 a.m.
That's correct.
6 to 9.
Yes, for Republic, and 6 to 8 for the city and the independent haulers.
Okay.
And then just as we conclude today, I just wanted to respectfully orientate the board kind of based upon where it seems where we're at. This started as a contested matter. We've now reached stipulation. I think during this hearing, the board members have heard testimony from members of Chiquita Canyon and El Sobrante. There hasn't been a lot of evidence confirming or denying where this trash would be diverted. But I think the board should keep in mind that if the trash isn't going to Sunshine Canyon, it's going to go somewhere else. And those people raise those concerns. And so where we're at today is focusing on organics, which all the experts have identified as a significant contributing factor to odors, and directly attacking that. The district's role is not to solely resolve one problem and create another. And so I would just respectfully orientate the board that where we've gotten today tries to balance all those different factors. You know, oftentimes at governing board meetings, staff will relay, you know, keeping everyone unhappy means we were successful. That's not what we're trying to do here. We're trying to get the best balance that doesn't create another problem, that expeditiously remedies this issue. And I just raise this just to sort of let the board know all the balls that are in the air and how we're trying to keep that balance to
remedy one problem that this community absolutely deserves, as well as not create one for others.
Appreciate your comments. We need to keep that in mind, that whatever we do does not result in some unintended consequences. Ms. Prusak?
I am mindful of that and understand it. And I hope that the parties are mindful of my intentions in my questioning, which is we are confronted with what appears to be a significant nuisance so far, as the testimony has presented itself. And so we're looking for immediate. And so I'm looking at time frame not just of when things are implemented, but when we will see relief. So that is really my focus.
Senator?
Mr. Sanchez, were you here when the hearing board adopted the abatement order with those terms and conditions specified within the order?
Which order?
Pardon?
Which one, Senator?
The abatement order regarding San Canyon with the 90-day, with the reduction in tonnage and the hours of operation.
Those aren't in effect now.
I know, that's what, they are in effect, they're not in effect now.
Correct.
Okay, but you were here when the board said that's going to be our position. No? What's specified in the abatement order?
We don't, we are currently considering an abatement order, but we have not adopted any.
Those conditions?
Possibly. Originally, that was what the district was seeking when it was contested. Now we're considering the stipulated order, but no decisions were ever made by the board.
Yeah, that's the point. The district was considering that. That's why it's written someplace.
And that's why, Senator.
That's why I came up with the answer, I mean, with the statement.
Right, and that's what I was just trying to bring up, is how we started there and where we're at today, and that's why I mentioned, made my statement just to sort of reorientate the board to the evidence that where we're at up to this point.
But you're the spokesperson for the district at the time that those terms are considered, is that correct?
That was part of my opening statement and the initial petition filed with the board. Correct.
But you're gonna waver a little bit, maybe.
I think the evidence I'll save that for closing argument, but like I said, I tried to give the factors and the impacts and why those impacts would make the ultimate outcome in which motivates a district in changing its position throughout this.
Do you have any reason to believe that some of the board members might not have gone along with that proposal if it was not suggested by the district?
Yes, and that's part of the process, and we will get to that point and have that
Process is
discussion.
fine, as long as it's not part of the problem.
We're going to continue this matter to tomorrow. Oh, the document that Ms. Manwaring has just distributed, titled Stipulated Abatement Order, Best Combination of Programs. It'll be marked as Exhibit 39 for the petitioner. And we are continuing this matter to tomorrow at 9 a.m. Board members, tomorrow we do have a consent calendar item. I don't know if you have provided the clerk of the board with your decision as to whether or not you wish to take it off calendar or allow it to remain on calendar. As you recall, I've asked each of you to positively communicate with the clerk of the board your desire. Is the petition okay as it is, or do you wish to take it off calendar? The parties need to know that ahead of time in the event it's taken off calendar so that they can be prepared to, as witnesses. Anything else before we adjourn? They already called? Okay.
On that issue, Mr. Chairman, what's your position? You tell me and I'll go.
That would be discussion, and before, we haven't heard the matter yet.
Okay, in terms of what you do.
Okay, we're adjourned for the day.
9 o'clock, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.